Welcome to the Ranch and Table Podcast, where we discuss all things related to our Texas ranch and our Ranch to Table restaurant located in downtown Rockwall. I'm your host, Lee Wells. Hello and welcome to the Ranch and Table Podcast. I'm Lee Wells, and today I'm adding a short introduction to my podcast that is about to begin. After shooting the podcast you're about to hear, I realized that one of the main points that I wanted to bring up was missed altogether. And because of the nature of this podcast and the guest and the subject matter and the time of year, I wanted to get it in while you're listening to this podcast today. So I want to say, when we vote in local, state, or national polls and ballots, sometimes people seem to vote with their feelings over the facts. So let me explain what I mean by that. How many times have you sat in the voting box and not known all of the candidates that are on the ballot? I mean, it might be down there pretty far in, the main guys, the main candidates, but there's some in there you just don't know. I think that's probably fair for a lot of us to say, yeah, there's been a time or two that's happened. So what do you do? What do you do when you don't know who to vote for? A lot of times we resort to feelings. We resort to how we feel about different candidates or their names. And so we could say something like, I don't know these guys, but I remember seeing a lot of signs with this guy's name on it. So we'll pick that one. Or maybe, this guy's already in office, so, well, that's at least something, we'll keep him in office. And so I want to go through about 3 or 4 things with you. Just think with me, if you will. Number one, you don't have to select every position on the ballot. You don't have to participate in every election on the ballot. If you don't know, don't cast a vote, because if you don't know, it's literally a gamble, and you could be working against some really good people trying to make some great change. So be careful not to vote if you don't know. Number two, you could be trying in your voting, you could be voting to keep somebody that's a bad apple and not realize that person needs to go. So just saying they're incumbent doesn't necessarily mean they need to go back in. So that's not a personal statement. That's just a general statement in general. Number three, it's not a popularity contest. Well, my mom is friends with the candidate's mom. Well, that doesn't matter. This person's family friends, and because they're family friends, I'm expected to vote for them. That's crazy. Don't do that. Don't vote for someone for those reasons. Vote for them because they're the right person for the right job, and they've got the right stance on what they're going to do. Number four, it doesn't matter how the candidate looks or speaks. Some of the dumbest people look great in a suit. Have you ever seen the NFL loading off the bus going into the stadium? I mean, come on. Looks do not matter when it comes to our representation. The looks do not matter. The hairstyle, the way their body type, those things really don't matter when it comes to who's going to represent us in the offices that we're voting for. Are you familiar with the TV show The Voice? And so the Voice concept is they start out with a blind audition. All the chairs are turned around, and it's just about the voice. And so if they like the voice, they turn around. And so looks aren't important. Body type's not important. Age is not important. It's just the voice, right? As soon as they turn around, though, the coaches always mention how good they look or how well they danced or something about that they couldn't see whenever they were in the midst of trying out in that audition and trying to see if that was the right person for them, the right voice for them. As soon as the coach's turn, it changes from the voice to everything else. And by the end of the show, it's a popularity contest. It's a popular vote that leans toward the best looking, the most charismatic, the best entertainer. And of course, they need to be able to sing. But I've seen seasons where the best singer went home 1 or 2 rounds into the competition. Some of the not so good singers end up in the final somehow because it's about everything but the voice. And so we say issues matter when it comes to elections. Well, they should matter then, not what some feeling about somebody is. Let me sum it up this way. Here's my opinion about elections. People many times are voting on the wrong criteria. They vote based on looks, charisma, friendship, connections, whose sign they saw the most. I think what we should really want is the best candidate, the one who's going to nerd out on reading legislation, people who live for constitutionality and the debates around whether or not this builds or determines degradation on the subject matter of what the founding fathers said. People who love to research precedents and statutes, and folks who are going to be available to research and then represent local causes and interests. Our forefathers envisioned a nation that functions with people who do well, interfacing with people, hearing their needs, and then putting into law and maybe taking out of law things that don't match what the founding documents are all about. And so I would rather have somebody in office that may not fit some GQ magazine idea of what a politician is supposed to look like. Instead, I'd rather have somebody there who is able to do the work that's required every day. Read the big documents. I mean, get out, get into it, dig in and figure out what they're saying, and be invested in the work that goes into being a legislature or a leader for me, representing me, my businesses, my home, my land, my taxes, all of those things. So I'm going to let you get right into this podcast. I wanted to preface it by saying my thoughts on elections in general. We have a primary coming up here in the next few days. Early voting is starting out. Those are my opinions. Think about that. Think how that affects you and if it makes sense. And I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome, everybody. Today is another great episode of the Ranch and Table. And really, really glad to have a good friend with me today. And I'm going to introduce him here in just a minute. Let me start out by saying today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Sterling Tea. And did you know that Rockwall has its own tea blending facility with serving over 200 different flavors and blends of tea and servicing hundreds of businesses throughout the United States. And so if you're a listener and you want to get a hold of some of that beautiful tea, they've given us a discount code of Wells20, and that will get you 20% off. Just go to sterlingtea.com and Wells20 will get you that 20% off. Please do that. Let them know that you came through our channel. And today I have with me in the Wells Ranch Studios, Dennis London, candidate for the Texas House of Representatives. Man, thanks for being with me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Well, man, I've known you for a little while.
Yes, sir.
And I think we probably got to know each other over burgers.
That's right.
That's kind of how it starts.
Best burgers in town.
I appreciate you saying it.
Yes, sir.
And with that, you know, we've grown through the first campaign, which didn't end up in a W for you.
No, sir.
But I listened to some of your speech the other night, and you still got a pretty good turnout for your first time in. I mean, tell us some of that, and then we'll get into more about how we know each other.
Sure. So the first time I ran, basically a no-name contender,
Mm-hmm.
and I managed to still get in almost 26% of the vote on about a 9-week campaign.
See, that's amazing. People don't realize how hard it is to get votes.
Yes, sir.
People do not realize how hard it is to get subscribers on a podcast.
Yeah, I bet.
It's kind of like customers. It's hard to acquire. And then you start looking at how much the price is. For me, what's the cost per customer of acquisition? And, for me right now on this podcast, I'm growing it. And I started an ad campaign last night. I'm like, how much money is it going to cost? And then, so how many subscribers could I maybe get?
Right.
And so you're in the same boat.
Absolutely.
Just having to spend money, having to spend time and effort, energy, and then hoping for people to convert from maybe where they voted last time to you, or maybe they hadn't voted at all, right. And they need to get out and vote.
Absolutely.
And so that's got to be a costly endeavor on every front.
It is. It really is. Just the name recognition is one thing, but getting people to be involved. A lot of folks, especially over the last, we could say probably 10 plus years, they've kind of taken a step back and away from politics. They're just, some people even say, what does it matter anymore? Why do I even bother? Why should I vote?
Yeah.
And, you see the way our country's going, see the way the state's going, and it matters greatly. It
probably matters more than ever.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think the case could be made that it does matter more than ever because of kind of the polarities and the extremes that we are seeing in politics. I was talking to she now is a representative, Texas House. I was talking to, I'll leave the name out, but I was talking to a lady the other day who just ran and got elected. And she was talking about the styles of politics and how they've changed, like from the Reagan era to where we are now. And kind of we went through some of the iterations. And she's a political science guru. I mean, just degreed, and studied it for years and years. And it was an interesting conversation about how things have changed from, and we say Reagan because that's what most of us alive today remember.
Absolutely.
And beyond that, it's kind of textbook stuff.
Sure.
For most of us. And then some of our younger people don't have a clue other than, people they may know who's named Reagan,
right.
But talk to me about how you've seen that develop from the way it used to be to kind of how it is now. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, so Reagan was actually my first commander-in-chief when I joined the Marine Corps. So going back to the different political aspects of it, I really wasn't as involved as I should have been. And, and so I knew some of the styles, some of the, the hard hitting on the facts or, just the conversational perspective. And I never really got into it as much. And, good or bad, but there's a lot of people now that are in that boat that they're not even paying attention. So I've watched as, Reagan was really good with having that conversation, bringing the comedy into it, making you feel like you're part of it, even if you're sitting in your home, right, across the country, or if he's having a conference over in Europe or something, you still feel like you're part of the conversation. And then it became almost, how do I say it? Almost like they were preaching to us, right? Like they were, we're going to tell you this and we're going to just emphasize and just beat it into you. And that really turned a lot of people off. And I actually would get to the point with some of it where I would just turn off the TV. I don't listen to this.
Well, there's been a couple of presidents that we've had in our lifetime that I really couldn't listen to.
Sure.
I mean, I just couldn't. Not necessarily. I mean, I didn't see eye to eye with most of what they said, but then I just couldn't stomach their style.
Right.
For whatever reason, I didn't resound or resonate with me at all. And I think that people have to be careful. I have to be careful on this podcast about that. I can come across a certain way and attract certain listeners, but also, push away a whole other group of listeners by the same way. I mean, we were, before we started, we were talking about Rush Limbaugh.
Right.
And he had a following, but he also had a lot of haters.
Oh, and he had some big haters.
He did. Vocal haters.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, we all have to be careful with the tone that we take and exactly how passionate we are about certain things. And I think that people want passion.
Sure.
I think that people want a honest, direct, relatable person. You know, if you think about it, I gave a speech, gave a keynote a few weeks ago, and I brought up pictures of people like Jelly Roll,
Okay.
people like Post Malone,
Right.
people like Oliver Anthony.
Okay.
These guys are just rough, redneck, coarse human beings. They just are. They're just rough in their own regard.
Right.
But there's one thing that they all have in common, and they're relatable, real people. They're not polished up.
Right.
They're not mannequin like individuals. They just are who they are. You take them, you leave them. They don't care.
Absolutely. And in the computer world, we call it WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get.
Yeah. And there's something very attractive to someone that you can look at and say, that guy's not really playing around.
Right.
That guy's really being direct with me, or he's being honest. I believe what he's saying he really means. And I think that politics, and I don't want to get into the different names because it's too polarizing.
Sure.
But there's some politics that's happened in our lifetime that had been so polished they were not believable.
Right.
And then there's people that are just hungry for. I mean, face tattoos are a long ways away from me.
Right.
I mean, I don't even have a tattoo. Face tattoos is a whole different, whole different universe from me.
Sure.
But I appreciate the real. I appreciate the genuine, and I really do believe that's where, if we can convey that,
Sure.
we got a shot at talking to people.
Yeah, it's got to be a brutal honesty, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it doesn't have to be brutal in the aspect of screaming at people, yelling at them, or whatever. But you just got to be completely honest.
Right.
You know,
And I think that's where you get the most traction.
Exactly. Even if that honesty isn't going to resonate with the person. Because I'll tell you, like my stance on school choice, I've had people that, well, I'm not going to agree with you. They're looking at me as if I'm going to switch my stance just to get them to agree with me.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way.
No, what you are is who you are.
Absolutely.
And and nobody's going to agree with somebody 100%.
No.
I mean, my wife and I got into a discussion at lunch today, and I don't know why she doesn't agree with me, but she didn't. And so I think that, and I want to pull it around to this. I think that we see, instead of working together in politics, I think we see opposition in politics. I think the aisle has grown into the Grand Canyon.
Sure.
And what used to be that someone could step across and shake a hand and maybe meet halfway on something has become so deeply entrenched and such a chasm that there's no way that we can reach the other side.
Right.
And so tell me, if you're elected, if you go into the House and you go to Austin, how do you overcome that? Because you still, to get majorities and to get the things done that have to be voted on,
Right.
at the end of the day, it comes down to whether or not you've got enough votes to make the thing go. How do you do that with such a big divide in politics nowadays?
Well, from the big perspective, if you're talking about doing a constitutional amendment or getting a proposition passed, you're looking at 100 votes, and we have 86 Republicans. Okay? There's 150 members. But to get a bill across, you only need 76. That's all you need. You just have to have enough of an approval, that 50% plus one or that 51%. So get it across the line. That way you can get it approved. You don't have to have 100. All right? Because they're going to keep talking about it. And you've heard it on, they talked about it at the GOP convention, talked about it at a lot of these other ones. And so they say, oh, well, you have to in order to get it across. Well, we're not doing that all the time. But if you do want to do that, common sense usually doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Common sense is common sense. Now, there are some on both sides. Common sense, it's a rare breed.
Right.
It ain't so common.
It lacks on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's not a left or a right issue. It's not whatever. And so if there's a common sense piece of legislation that needs to get across, you can just look at someone dead in the eye and go, look, this is common sense here. I mean, right or wrong, left or right, whatever you want to, common sense dictates that this is what we should be doing. And with 86 Republicans, you should have enough to be able to pass what we need to pass on that Republican legislative side. And I know that that's a partisan side. Now, on the Democrat side, are they going to put together something that might be good? Sure. And there have been some good, Democrat pieces of legislation. And did they pass? Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. Right. So you do have to find that middle ground, but you have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to work with someone, and I'm sure we've all worked with people that we didn't like.
Absolutely.
Right. And,
Sure.
And
so then it comes down to a judgment call on what the compromise entails.
Absolutely.
If there's a compromise, and usually there is. And then you have to weigh that, and so does everybody else voting, if it's worth it or not. I think we go back to Reagan. I think that's one of the strongest suits he had was the ability to talk sense that everyone could understand or kind of rally around. He could make things happen.
That's why they called him the Great Communicator, right? Because he knew how to communicate the issues, knew how to communicate the topics, and he would work with folks, even those that didn't like him or didn't want to work with him. He would put it into a phrase or put it into terminology that they can't argue with.
Right.
A lot of people say, because there's a lot of times when I'm answering a question and they say, well, you've got 60 seconds to respond, please state. That's not a lot of time to answer some of these questions. Right. So we actually practice these 60-second drills. And so in the 60 seconds, you start with an inarguable fact. Okay. Well, you say, well, what would you do? We have this border security issue, and Biden is overstepping into this. And so here you've got all this stuff coming into play. So you have 60 seconds to respond to border security.
Which for a question that took longer than 60 seconds to ask.
Exactly.
Right. I'm with you. Yeah.
So you have to start with the inarguable fact, something to the effect of, border security is not just a national issue. It's a state issue. It's not even just a state issue. It's a community issue. It's our cities. And then you talk about how drugs and everything coming through, and then you can restate the problem, and then you provide your solution. That whole thing can be done in less than 60 seconds. But it's all about communication, right? How do you communicate that? And, if you got somebody that thinks the border should be wide open and you're trying to tell them this, they're not going to listen to you. They've already shut down.
Right. So you have to be open to it anyway. I mean, to have the conversation, regardless of the side of the aisle. Yeah. That's.
Do you want pickles on your burger? I don't like pickles. Yes, you do.
Well, don't get pickles. It's fine. Just get the burger.
Just there you go.
Yeah. When we look at some of those specific things that you just mentioned, border security, talk to me a little bit about that. Of course, we all hear the talking points that the media wants us to hear, but what's the real deal? What's really happening down there?
Oh my! Well, I mean, we can talk about the humanitarian perspective, right? It's a humanitarian issue. It's a humanitarian crisis because there are people that are fleeing.
It's always been that way, though.
Right.
That's not a new problem.
Exactly. So we have to try and get them through our ports of entry. The problem is that right now, the Biden administration, the federal government wants to allow them just to cross wherever they want. And we're sitting here as one of the border states, and then you have Arizona and you have California, and they're sitting there saying, no, we don't want people coming across illegally. That's really what it's about, is the illegal entry. Come through a legal port, go through the process. If you want to come across and you're going to be a day worker, great, we'll pull you across through the actual border patrol, through the actual secure area. We'll bring you in. We do the scan, we do the facial recognition, we do the documentation, we do everything that we're supposed to do. But they want to just allow people in illegally. And then here we have, over almost 200 people that have been identified on the terrorist watch list. We're seeing groups coming in that are Chinese military-aged, men that are, you watch them march up the streets through some of these areas or through the jungles or on the trails. They're actually marching in a formation and almost in step. Okay, they're trying not to, but they can't help it because it's been drilled in and ingrained in them. Right. So we're seeing that. We're seeing the cartels bringing people across. They come across wearing those wristbands, and that was something that a lot of people were talking about over the last couple of years. And those wristbands, so it's basically their identification as to how much they owe and to which sect or gang or cartel that they actually owe the money to, and how much in some instances. Oh, well, these people are going to go into this trade. They're going to go over here and do this. It's like going to the state fair. Okay, well, you have the blue band. You get to go into this section over here. You've got the yellow band. You go over to here. It is just horrible what they're doing with people. So we really do need to secure it and lock it down.
So I've stayed pretty busy day to day. I have a lot going on.
Yes, you do.
And so forgive me for my ignorance on this topic. There's a lot of it I do know I'm letting you talk about, and I'm not going to rebut you on any of it because I agree with what you're saying.
Appreciate it.
But what about Arizona? What about California? It's always a Texas issue, at least in Texas.
Right.
But what you hear Abbott sending bus loads to New York, and so what's California doing? What's Arizona doing? Why is this such a Texas? I mean, even Trump got involved the other day. I don't know why got involved, and I'm not anti-Trump, but why would he get involved in talk about Texas and Abbott and the border if there's in New Mexico? We forgot New Mexico's got it's a border state as well. So you got 4 border states that we could talk about. What are they doing? Do we know?
Well, California being a Democrat run, a lot of people are just saying, well, that's your problem. You don't want any of our help. We're going to let you do it on your own. And
in New Mexico, probably
New Mexico is the same, very similar.
Right.
Arizona, however, they do have forces that are out there, and they're actually trying to take back some of the forest land that's down there on the border. That's federal land that they can't get into because the cartels have taken it over. They literally, I think it was something like 10 or 12 miles worth of land off the border that the federal agencies won't even go into because the cartels own it, or at least they've
taken over.
It.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, it's a battle that is it is of national importance.
That brings it back to a national level.
Absolutely,
not just state. Well, it's always interesting to get down into those discussions. I don't want to get too deep, but tell me about. I know vouchers is a big deal. Tell me your thoughts on that and kind of both sides of that real quick.
Sure. Well, the big thing about education right now, it is the social issue of the 21st century. It really is. People are clamoring to get their kids educated. They're trying to get them into the right schools. And then what we have is that, there are some low performing schools. We know that, right? And we also know that there are some great performing schools. I'm not saying that, vouchers is going to be needed everywhere, right? But I think that the big issue is that parents want to know that the education their kids are getting is what they're paying for. Because when you go somewhere, like when you go to Wells Cattle, you want a good tasting burger, right? If you didn't get one, you'd let somebody know or you wouldn't come back.
I hope, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so from that perspective, and it's customer satisfaction, right? The end product is an educated child. And that kid should be able to do the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic. They should know science. They should have an understanding of history. These are the basic principles that our educational system should be providing.
Right.
Not CRT, DEI, ESG, what gender are you, these types of things.
Right.
That shouldn't be part of the discussion.
Right.
Right.
So the basic education is the goal.
Absolutely.
And if I could back us up a few years to when I was in school, the state got involved and said, we're going to give you standardized tests to make sure that you're doing this. And with that, now you have schools teaching to the test.
Right.
And so we didn't accomplish it there.
Nope.
So now is this another swing, another attempt for education to be better than just standardized testing, saying you got these basics learned? Is that what we're really seeing, is parents saying, hey, my kids aren't learning enough, let's do something else because the standardized test isn't working? Is that a fair statement?
Sure. Well, in the standardized, so you have the standardized test, right? You've got the STAR test. You've got all these other ones. Then you had No Child Left Behind, right? Everybody's going to pass. So what did they start doing? They started teaching to the lowest common denominator. All right, let's just make sure all the kids can pass. Well, what about the ones who are trying to excel? Well, they weren't getting that education. They weren't getting that push.
Right.
And some kids just needed a push, right? And some of the ones that are, quote unquote, going to be left behind, maybe they should have been left behind.
Well, they could try again next year.
Right? Summer school.
Sure.
Right? So,
absolutely.
these are the things that we really need to take into consideration, because if you say that, and in the 90s, what was it? Everybody started complaining about. Remember, there was the participation trophies.
Right.
Every kid gets a trophy.
Right.
I remember when our baseball team didn't win, and we sat there and we watched as they handed out trophies to first and second place.
And you didn't get one.
We didn't get one. And coach turned around, he said, we got to work harder.
Right.
All right. You need to work on your grounding drills. You need to work on your pop flies. You need to work on your batting. And so it was things that we had to work for. We all didn't get a trophy just because.
Right.
Got to give something to strive for.
Well, in business, you certainly don't get participation trophies.
No, sir.
You either get business or you don't.
That's it.
You either have a customer or you don't. And in real life, that's the way it is.
Absolutely.
I mean, you either build good relationships or you don't. You either are going to succeed or you're going to sit there and watch everyone else succeed. So it's a disservice.
Absolutely.
So the vouchers discussion, I guess, is another opportunity for a parent to have some control in their hand to say, my kid's not doing well. I think it's the actual school. And so because of that, we're not going to lie on our entrance application and say we live in a different house or with grandma. This is a way for us to take this action to move them over into this other school.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, because then you're also not paying twice. Right. And there are some parents that are in that position where they can pay twice. Money's not the issue for them. And heck, I keep hearing, people tell me, oh, well, what if the parents take the kid out of that school, the school's going to lose the money and, you're going to defund the public education. Well, let's think about that for a minute, because if a parent is going to take a kid out of a school and the only option they have is to move, there are some parents that'll move.
Yeah.
The money will still follow the kid. You'll lose that kid anyway. The problem some people face is that they can't afford to move. Maybe it's because of their proximity to work.
Moving is a very hard thing to put on someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's not
right.
That's not necessarily equal to education of my child kind of severity.
There are some parents, because I'll tell you, the people that bought my house when I sold it, they moved into that area because of the school.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're moving, that's part of it.
Sure.
That's part of for some people, and whether or not you play football and what the football team's doing. Yeah, there's other factors.
Who's the coach?
Yeah, there's factors. I was speaking to this other House representative the other day, and maybe you could speak to this. She was saying that the actual funding pool is not the same for the vouchers versus the standard education funds that fund the way it is right now, that it would actually be monies would be moved from a different type of money.
That's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
They wanted to create a separate fund for it so that it didn't take away from the general fund for the education.
Right. And so that would actually solve that argument.
Sure.
As we can tell, there's no shortage of money. We just print more, send it to whatever war we want to.
Right.
So, I mean, Texas could do the same thing. I'm joking. If you cannot tell in my voice, that is sarcasm. I have to explain sarcasm sometimes when you're not watching me or listening closely. So I do not believe in just printing money.
But we did have a big surplus too. We had $33 billion.
Texas does.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll say they gave $18 billion back in property tax relief.
Yeah.
Right. So, I know we were talking about different things.
I didn't see any relief.
Yeah. So, well, first off, that $18 billion, there's $5.7 billion that was rolled over from the last budget. So
it wasn't quite that much.
It wasn't quite $18 billion. It was 12 and change.
That's some political math.
Yeah, sure. And then we pay our property taxes every year, not every other year.
Right.
So that 12 and change is actually 6 and change.
Right.
But I'm not going to get into that.
Well, I mean, I can just talk about myself.
Sure.
And I own more acreage than probably most people listening to this podcast. And that's not a boast. It's I operate more acreage than most ranches in Texas. And that's not a boast. It's just a fact.
Sure.
We're almost 1,000 acres of operation. And so I am very aware of my property taxes and a lot of that, being in ag, some that can be in ag, some that can't, by the rules. But my numbers haven't changed, and I don't project them. They're not being projected to change.
Right.
So I don't know. It's kind of like funny money to me. And again, this has nothing to do with the people who made that happen. I like the effort. I like the direction of savings. So that's not a knock against anybody. I just don't know that I'm actually going to see that.
Right. Well, something's better than nothing. And when they talk about it on those big scales and the big numbers, who's going to really see it?
Well, I want to see it.
Well, sure, we want to.
I want to see some tangible things.
Absolutely.
Which is where I'm going next with this question.
All right.
If you're elected, talk to me about how, and let me pause and just clarify for those listening. I do not reside in your district.
That is correct.
So just so everyone's clear, I can't place a vote for Dennis London. I live at the ranch now. My candidate was elected just a couple weeks ago. And then she'll run again, and we'll have to do all this all over again out here. So this is not a political talk with my candidate, but I do own businesses in your district. And so I'm affected by the district, even though I don't have a vote. But we're talking to people who a majority of our listeners are in your district.
Sure.
And so if you're elected, a lot of times I listened to your speech the other night, good speech, great speech.
Thank you.
Great reception, great. It was good. It was good. It was kind of along the lines of the hot topics, right? Because that's what a stump speech is let me hit the things everyone knows about. But let me ask you a little deeper question. If elected, you're going to go there for your term, a full term, right? What can you do for businesses, local businesses in your district? Like there's places for new legislation. There's places for discussion on change. Sure. There's places where even outside of the chambers, you're able to affect change because of the position that you're in. People listen. You're going to be speaking at various events as a dignitary. Tell me about how that will affect me. We just said the big funny money number don't ever really come down to my pocketbook, my checkbook. Right. It doesn't seem like it. I'm not saying it can't. Sure. It just doesn't feel like it does. What can you do? Because I know the heart of guys like yourself. I feel like I know the real drive down in there is to help people. Mm-hmm. So how do you help? How does a guy in your position help outside of the big things like border security, which I'm not minimizing, right? And vouchers, I'm not minimizing. Sure. But where else can you be maybe even more help to the local community in that position?
Well, and that's where listening to the community, getting out and being involved and engaged, you have to first talk to the business owners. You have to talk to the city councils. You have to talk with your county commissioners and then also chambers of commerce. Mm-hmm. You have to find out what are the issues that people are having. What are the stumbling blocks? What are the hurdles? And, I could profess to say, well, I know about this for small businesses, and I would only know a small portion probably. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if I were to ask you, what stumbling blocks do you have with regards towards standing up a new store location, setting up a new business, or, advertising, or whatever the case may be. And maybe it's even just regarding building permits, right? Because I know there's a process around that, and sometimes it's not so easy, right? So, I need to expand the parking lot. Well, now you got to look at everything that's involved in expanding a parking lot. Expanding a parking lot takes a whole lot of time, effort, energy, and money. Mm-hmm. Well,
more than anybody understands.
Absolutely. Well, and I don't even understand all of that. So again, I would have to sit down and talk with those folks because, I love the Ronald Reagan philosophy. And I know you and I talked about this one time in your store, restaurant. Sorry, I keep saying store. I don't know why. Maybe
It's a store.
I was over by the hats.
It's a store.
So
we sell stuff.
The Ronald Reagan philosophy. I don't need to be the smartest man in the room. I just have to surround myself with them. Mm-hmm. I have to know where to go to get the answers. And so being able to maintain that humble, that humility perspective and say, look, I don't know that answer. Let me go and talk to, maybe it's your Chamber of Commerce. Maybe it's the business owners in downtown or the folks in the outlying areas. What is stopping these areas from being successful? And a lot of times, you may hear we don't get the foot traffic, or advertising. When we advertise, we have our signage out front, or we've got a billboard, but people don't come in because maybe it's inconvenient. It's too far down a farm to market road. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be county, and it's got potholes everywhere, and people don't want to drive there because their vehicles, they don't have trucks, or whatever the case may be. So, there's a lot of things involved. So, okay, well, great. What can I do? From not necessarily the state legislative perspective, right? There will be some things that'll probably be able to be done, but more than likely, it's just going to be talking to counties or cities and saying, look, you're making it really hard for people. I don't know if you've talked to them, because I love going to city council meetings and listening to what people have to say, going to county commissioners and listening to what people have to say, because you're going to hear people come out mostly when they're upset. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Every now and then you get that person that comes in and goes, I just want to thank Mayor so-and-so, or I just want to thank Councilman so-and-so.
It's rare.
Right? It's a rarity.
Yeah.
But why don't people do that more? Well, because it's an inconvenience. You have to find, I got to find time out of the day, usually during the day, to go to a commissioner's court, or maybe it's on a work night, but I can't, you're stuck in traffic on 30. Right? Or you're trying to get across on 20 or 30 right now. I mean, that's why I was almost late, because I was sitting there on traffic. I'm like, well, I better just get on the frontage road. And that was moving faster than the freeway.
I was speaking of things that need to be done, I was talking to someone the other day and connected to one of our senators. And I was saying, what can we do about maybe changing the laws on the highways out here to maybe keep trucks over to the right lane a little bit better or something? Because and we were just having a conversation, and he said, it's a great idea. He said, I don't know exactly what can be done. And I'm thinking, well, I don't have a position to go talk to anybody about it.
Right.
I'm talking to my position right here. I'm talking to the guy
Absolutely.
who I thought could get something done.
Right.
And we agreed that a lot of the issues that we have, at least in this segment of traffic right here, is, and I'm talking from Greenville, Royce City up into the bridge area.
Sure.
The biggest problem, and I drive it often, so I will argue with anybody who disagrees with this, is trucks swinging to the left lane dangerously, and then they camp out over there. They don't get back.
Right.
Like, I'm okay with you passing a vehicle, but then you don't move. And then for 3 miles, I'm sitting back here doing 60, 55 and a 70, and I'm frustrated just because feel like you're more important. So if you're not going to do it right, that's what laws are for.
Right.
So once you get closer to the bridge, once you get closer to the Ray Hubbard Bridge, it says trucks, right lane, no left lane or whatever.
Right.
I think they should do that all the way back to Greenville or Royce City.
Sure.
And I think that makes sense because the growth and the number of people that are on the roads now, and I've watched it. I grew up out here.
Right.
I used to be able to make it all the way to Royce City and see 6 or 8 cars, depending on the time of day.
Right.
Not anymore.
Nope.
Even on a Saturday, I'm stuck in a slowdown for no reason.
Yes, sir.
And so I think that as those things change, then perhaps the rules have to be shifted a little bit and changed to make it work for everybody.
Sure.
But if I don't have anybody to talk to, or that sees it as that big of a deal, then there we are. I went to I've been to the local powers that be for 5 years asking for a crosswalk in front of my restaurant. And they have one on the same road, just 2.5 blocks up, right? So as 66 curves around and becomes right in front of San Jacinto Plaza there, they've put one on 66. And they won't do it back there. And then what happens is the city blames the TxDOT, and then TxDOT says, we don't care. And they don't say it quite like that,
right?
But I would love for someone to go sit down with me at TxDOT and say, look, it's like playing Frogger to get across this 2-lane highway at most time of the day.
Sure.
Unless it's 10 o'clock at night and a Sunday night, you don't just walk across that. You stand there and wait, and finally either you get tired and step out and hope they stop, or someone finally feels sorry for you and stops,
right?
And you get a chance to cross it. And so what happened is they say about 5 years ago they sent a engineer to do a traffic study.
Okay.
Well, but he came at I think it was, don't misquote this. I don't want to quote it exactly, but it was not rush hour.
Right.
It was the most off time during the day, easiest time during the day. And then, so it wasn't enough traffic volume to justify it. And then you move on to just a couple of years ago, and they came back and did it, and then I never heard anything else from them.
Right.
And so I'm even though I'm needing it. My customers need it. The city needs it.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the trailhead, by the way, of the city's park system. It dead ends onto that same road right by me.
That's right.
So you go between two parks. You got two parks connected all the way out, and you come up there and you can't get across.
Right.
I see people like jogging in place, holding their dog leash as they wait for some chance to cross,
Right.
or they're all kicked off on their bikes on one leg waiting for traffic. And so what can be done from a guy that's an elected official with, now this is TxDOT, so that would be
Right.
purview. How do we work together to make something like that happen? That's a real problem
Sure.
that could take some real action from someone that would step up and help.
Sure. Well, take the information that you provide, right? So you're talking already to somebody at senator's office at one point. You probably, I don't know, you may have talked to somebody at a rep's office as well. And so you take that information, that goes to TxDOT, and you should have whoever that representative or senator is, you should have them directly involved in it, not just send somebody from their office. Because then that way they go in, they go, look, we need to have a traffic study done, and not just during this time of the day. We need to make sure that we have one from about the time that my store opens through the lunch rush, through the afternoon,
Till we close.
and into the evening until we close, right? So you go through that time span and you work your way around the clock.
Which that's just a rubber sensor or hose that runs across the road. It's not
Sure.
a big deal.
Right.
It's not like someone has to sit there with a clipboard.
No.
I
Well,
mean-
and why not? Why not have somebody sit there with a clipboard and just kind of monitor it as well? You know,
Be fine with
they
me.
don't have to be there all day.
Yeah.
You know, and heck, maybe you could give them tea during the day and they just come out and sit down and
I'll feed them all day long.
right.
Whatever
So
they need.
That's it. You know, but I mean, these are just some of the things that you could do, right? So okay, well, what could someone at the state legislative level do? Well, they could come by and be involved. All right, so let's say it's during the session. I'm down in the House. Okay, well, I can't be there to do that. I can't walk through this process. I can make phone calls. I can send an email, and it's not from a staffer.
And you're only there so many weeks a year anyway.
Yeah, it's 140 days.
Yeah.
You know, but then you're still down there. There's other committee meetings. There's other things that are going on. So yeah, you know, unless there's special sessions, hopefully not 4 again. But
Right. I think that those are the kinds of things that real citizens like to know.
Sure.
If I have an issue, do I have somebody I can call that cares about what I'm going through?
Right.
And then they may say, that's really not what I do, but let me see. There's people call me about their restaurant issues, and I'm not the guy, but I care
Right.
enough. I had someone the other day say, man, I want to just get with you and talk with you about some of the issues I'm going through. I'm like, sure. I mean, I'm not a counselor or anything. I may not be the guy, but I can listen. And we sat and talked about it, came up with a couple ideas. He was happy. He went away from there and had some direction and got some stuff figured out. And that I think that at the end of the day, those kinds of things matter to the people who end up needing those kinds of things to come together in their life, right?
Now, I just handed you my business card for one reason.
Okay.
So in the Marine Corps, my motto, or, the Marine Corps motto is Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Okay. For the campaign, as well as my motto during my time in the legislature, it's going to be Semper Presto, which means always available. Would you read the phone number that's on there so that all your listeners and viewers actually have my phone number?
Yeah, it's 469-929-5409. So that's your cell phone?
That's my cell phone.
Okay. Nice. We put it into the internet.
That's it. Well, see, and this is the thing, right?
But I like that.
It's on my campaign materials. It's when I put it. So Living Magazine, for example, right? Living Magazine that goes out to all the areas. We were just in the February release, and my phone number's in there. That went to 40,000 homes in Rockwall, and so everyone there has my phone number if they have Living Magazine.
Well, I tell you what, nobody can question that kind of commitment. Because my cell phone doesn't go out on any postage.
Right. Well, but this is.
But I appreciate that.
This is what being a representative is about. I mean, it's in the name, representative. You're
Right.
representing the people. So why not be available? Why not make yourself available?
That's a bold move. I like it.
So that's the part that when I go and I knock on doors, and I've knocked on thousands of doors, And the people that I've talked to said, wait a minute, I've never had anyone knock on my door before. Not the actual candidate.
Right.
Right. You know, not at this level. You know, maybe they have someone running for city council or for a precinct chair or something like that. But someone for state rep or, you know, what that person didn't knock on my door. And these are local community hometown folks. And you're the first person that's ever since they live there. And some folks, it's been decades. And I just find that absolutely amazing. And I said, well, no, I'm the candidate. What questions do you have for me? There have been a couple where, you know, I spent 20 minutes. We went into the kitchen, sat down at their table, had a cup of coffee, and, you know, had those kitchen table discussions, kind of like what we're doing here, having the personal one-on-one conversation. You can't do that with 183,000 people in the district, but you can do it with the few in the area that you can meet with and talk to. And I mean, every Monday morning, I'm down at the Bagel Lady in Rockwall, you know, doing coffee with a candidate. You know, I'm there from 7 to 8:30.
People can come in and
absolutely
and sit and talk with you and ask
if I'm
questions.
not there, there's usually one or two people that know he's not going to be here today or whatever. You know, and sometimes it's I'm traveling or maybe it was something with family or what have you. So,
Stuff comes up.
Absolutely.
For sure.
We all know stuff happens.
Absolutely. Let me pause real quick if you don't mind. And I want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Sterling Tea. And they are an international tea blending company. And they've been partnered with us for over 5 years now and doing a great job. Amazing consistency. It's one of the best products that we could ever have imagined serving. And our peach mango and our regular unleaded, our regular tea, unsweetened tea, is there for you. And if you'd like some of that tea in your life, you can go to their website, sterlingtea.com, and enter Wells20 for 20% off. And they'll be happy to know that you came from this podcast and then also give you that 20%. And just so you know, that is the largest discount that they have available, and it's going to be the longest running discount that they have ever done. And so they're doing that for us here on the Ranch and Table podcast and for our listeners. So that is a great deal. That is an amazing deal. And so we really appreciate Brenda and her staff for supporting us and doing what they do for us. And so I want to be able to give that back to them with some business. And so be by and go see them. If you're a restaurant owner, you want to set up a tasting, they'll set up some options for you to check out and serve in your restaurant. And I highly, highly recommend you doing that for yourself and for your customers. It will take you to another level. So sterlingtea.com, Wells20. Thank you so much, Brenda. We appreciate you. So let's say you get elected and you go to work and you do all these things that we've talked about and it's success. I love it. You're probably going to go for another term if you like it, and it's all of what you think it is and more. But let me ask you this. What if you're not elected? And what if it doesn't work out for whatever reason? Where do you see yourself next year or after that session, the voting? What would you do? How would you move forward?
Continue advocating for what we're already doing. I mean, this is what I did last time. I never quit. This whole past year, I spent time going down to Austin testifying for the good bills and against the bad bills. I was working with senators, working with House reps, working with the State Republican Executive Committee, working with the Republican Party of Texas. I was one of the members that was helping with HB 900, the Reader Act, to get that filthy material out of our schools. So I went around the Capitol and was educating representatives and their staff and some of the senators and their staff on what was actually in these books. So I don't see me taking my foot off the pedal. I'm just hoping that as an elected representative, I'll be able to do more instead of being on the back end and doing the background work. I'll be actually able to push the yay or nay button.
Right.
And make that change.
And I know that's a hard question to answer at this point because you're so focused on getting the votes and winning. But I think that answer actually answers my question even better than what you might have realized, because
Okay.
the question is, of course, you want to get elected and you don't want to think anything other than that.
Right.
But the real answer is you've always worked at this. Even when you lost the last election, you've continued to work. And if you lose again, you'll still continue to work.
Yes.
Which is the kind of guy that should inspire some confidence in folks, that you're not just trying to get a position. You'd like that position because it will help be more effective. But if not, then you're still going to go to work every day trying to do the right thing and get the right things done in our state. And I appreciate that answer for sure.
Thank you. Absolutely.
In the culture of elections, we kind of talked about this earlier. We talked about the toxic type of environment that has come up, right?
Sure.
And we kind of mentioned, we hit on that. It's almost a hatred perceived, at least perceived,
Sure.
by the voter. Like I said, I got involved in another election recently. And the reason I got involved was I stepped up and said, this is very ugly.
Mm-hmm.
This is ugly. This is nasty. Why is it so muddy? And why is there so much mud being thrown? And it really, there was some answers. Some of the answers were, I got to defend myself. I can't just lay down and take it. I have to be able to stand up and fight back because of things that were not truthful or whatever. And I get giving an answer back for untruth, stuff like that. What can you do? And this isn't a Christian podcast. This is a business podcast, and we're talking business. But as a Christian, as a professed Christian, where is that line for you? You have to stand up for yourself, right? You can't just let someone tell a story that's not true.
Right.
But then, is there a line that you say, you know what? As for this guy, y'all do what you're going to do. I'm not going to go that. I'm not doing that. What? Talk about that for a minute.
There has to be lines, and first and foremost, no family. Right. You're the candidate. I'm the candidate. You come after me all day, every day.
Yeah.
I don't mind. Right.
Yeah. Leave the family out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sure. That's
so
fair.
that's first and foremost. Okay. But when it comes to like a retaliation or an attack or what have you, I mean, has there been some things about, that were said about me? Sure. There's things that have been said, and I can rebut them. I can refute them. And, there was a mailer that came out saying that I support, one of the past representatives, even though he gave alcohol to a minor, right? I supported him before I knew that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
He was a good staunch conservative.
Yeah.
But when that incident happened, I was like,
Course correction.
I will pray for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But wow.
Yeah.
So,
well, there was a good friend of mine in Rockwall politics a few years ago that it was an ugly deal. It came out that there was some improprieties in his life.
mm-hmm.
Well, that man and I had sat down at a table and talked several times. And for those that know me, know I'm a pastor, I'm a minister. So it's not hard for me to sit down and talk to anybody, especially people that are struggling or hurting. I never knew of any of the improprieties, that came out legally. And then that was a rough deal.
Sure.
But yeah, someone could have snapped a picture of him and I sitting there. He was in position in the city. Many times, him and I sitting there having lunch, talking. And then
they would paint you in that picture.
And then get the event order kind of mixed up.
Right.
And say, well, look, Lee Wells is sitting there with this guy that's, done all these things.
Right.
Well, I didn't know. So, I mean, I don't think anybody can be held responsible for that kind of things, but that's the kind of stuff that happens in politics.
Sure.
And that's the kind of toxic environment.
And it's the shock value, right? They want to go for the shock value. Oh my gosh, I can't support this person because of this. And they want to try and sway your voters away from you. And that's really what it is. You can't win them on the merit of what you're doing. So you have to paint that person in an ugly picture.
Right.
And, it's dirty politics, but it's politics.
Would you say that if you were to line up and just go grab 4 Republicans, would you say they probably agree on 85, 90% of the same stuff?
For the most part.
And then you take 6 or 8, Democrats over here, and they would probably agree on maybe 80-85% of the same stuff,
Sure.
right? And then you put all them together, it probably doesn't go down too far.
No.
It probably goes down to maybe 75%. Would you say? I'm spitballing numbers, but when you really look at what people sit and talk about and really believe, for the most part, people are pretty good people.
Sure.
Or they're not. They get ousted. I mean, for good reason. But really, the big chasms that we see and the big differentials that we see aren't really as big as we try to make them.
Usually, for the most part, they're not. I mean, we can talk about border security, and now we have Democrats all over the country looking at this, going, "Yeah, it's an issue." You got New York now saying we need to do something about this. Really? Well, hold on now. You're a sanctuary city. Whatever happened to all this? Please bring us them. No, now you don't want them. We can't handle them. Wait, you've only got 10,000 the entire month. We get that in like a day and a half.
Right.
You want to call that a big problem for you? But what do you think's happening here? So
the big differences are exaggerated for a lot of time.
I would say so.
For what we're really looking at. And at the end of the day, you and I could sit here and talk. If we talked long enough about enough things, even though I would say we're pretty aligned in our morals and our outlook on Texas and in the United States, I think that we would probably be 90% together.
Sure.
We would find 10% that we do not agree on.
Right.
You start talking religion a little bit. You start talking about, does the Bible really say that?
Right.
And before long, we could find things, and this is true with anybody.
Absolutely.
Including maybe even my wife today at lunch, that we don't agree 100% on.
Absolutely. All
the time. But that doesn't stop us from sitting down and talking.
Right.
And I think that just like Reagan and just like we've talked before, this highly volatile type situation is not good for our state. It's not good for our country.
Right.
I don't know that you're going to find a more corrupt individual than Bill Clinton.
Right.
He even admitted it, and we know it.
Yeah.
He couldn't be held to a letter of the law kind of a conviction.
Sure.
But everybody knew what happens and what kind of guy he is. But he led the country decently. I mean, much better than what we got today, right?
I mean, can't deny that. Yeah.
I'm trying to get somewhere.
Right. Even though he diminished our military power and went through things like that,
he did a bunch of stuff wrong,
right?
But he was a better leader than what we got now.
Oh, we still had his cognitive abilities about him.
So even the worst day in America, I think we still have, for the most part. Now there's exceptions like what we see in Washington right now,
sure,
which is a circus. And I don't want to get into that because that would take another hour of our time at least. But the point I'm trying to make is the differences aren't as big as we say. And if we all really do love Texas and we really do want the best for Texas, even if we're divided on another hot topic is abortion, that's a very volatile discussion,
sure,
right? But even if we talk about some of those things, we're going to find big differences. But for the most part, we ought to be able to find some common ground to continue to keep Texas, the industry that it has, the economics that it has, the gross national product that it has, right? The success levels that we find here that we don't find other places.
Right.
And hopefully, if you get elected and all that works out, I would love to see you go down there and bring people together more so than just decimate any chance of working together.
Right.
Yeah. Would you say that's your goal? I mean,
well, the goal obviously is to advocate for what the people want. That's, I mean,
we want Texas to stay strong, secure, profitable. We want our businesses to keep growing.
Well, what's the fundamental role of government? It's to protect property, right? It's to protect life and our liberty. That's the fundamental role of government. Okay. It's not to go down and create new laws that are going to give this business this advantage or take this away from people or whatever.
Just let me be successful. Please leave me alone.
Exactly.
And let me do it.
Less government is better. We don't need to have our fingers in everything.
I agree.
And so many people want, well, we have to have legislation for this, for that, for this, for that. No, you don't. You really don't. You know what? Personal responsibility is a good thing.
Yeah.
And
I'd rather have an advocate than somebody down there creating more laws.
And that's really what, I've been doing that already, advocating for this stuff. And when I talk to people from different coalitions, whether it's, a homeowners coalition or homeschooling coalition or some of these others, they're saying, we want this, we need this. It's like, okay, well, how are you doing that? Well, we're talking to Senator so-and-so, we're talking to Representative so-and-so, and they go through these different aspects. I said, well, I'll come join you. And, I get myself educated on the issue. I find out what are the talking points, what are the things that people want to actually throw back at you as, well, you can't do that because of this. We all hear that, right? I mean, oh, well, your business will never succeed because of X, Y, or Z. And we all hear that, right? Sure. Okay, great. Well, what if I overcome those?
I was told not to go in the location we were in. I've had business owners come up to me since and say, man, I was really worried about y'all taking that building that, 3 or 4 other businesses have failed in. Right. I said, well, I guess I was just dumb enough to not know because we overcame all of that. We continually do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I don't need legislation in my way. But I do need an advocate on my side to say, this is good. This is not good. We're going to be there for you. We're going to help you.
And they should be communicating that with you too. They should be open to when you call or when you write or when you email or whatever the case is. And if you come down to meet with them, they should take the time to meet with you.
It's the least they could do.
Absolutely.
As my representative.
Well, as your employee, because you're the boss. Right.
Right. Absolutely right. Well, man, I've enjoyed the conversation. I really have, and I appreciate you coming. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of the whole show, and it's called Rapid Fire. And I hope you are prepared.
Sure.
I hope that you are ready because this is one of my favorite parts. I want to first say that today's Rapid Fire segment is brought to us by our friends at Fate Creamery. It's Fate is one of the best ice creams that known to man.
I haven't been there. Now I want to go.
You should do it. They have not only won Best of awards since they opened for the community, and they have a ton of them, but they also go to Vegas every year, and they have won national awards from people who, on a scientific level, for the science of ice cream, they've won several Best awards there, and so that's an amazing accomplishment, and several years in a row. It's the best ice cream I have ever had, and they're located right across from the fire station downtown Fate, and they're an amazing company. We're partnered with them, have for years, look to do it for years more. So ice cream done right, it's Fate Creamery. So
I just wrote that down. I'm going to stop by there on the way home, take it home for dessert.
You need to. The cookie butter ice cream is the best ice cream that I believe a person can put in their mouth.
All right.
And if you get it as a shake, oh my God.
Game over, huh?
I'm losing concentration, and I need my concentration right now for this game that we're about to play. This is called Rapid Fire.
All right.
And so I'm going to let you go first. You're my guest. So ask your question. I'll try to answer, and then I'll ask, and we'll go back and forth.
All right. I'll start with an easy one. Why'd you start Wells?
The burger?
Yes, sir.
Because we had been selling beef for about a year, and not quite a year, and we had the most premium ground beef in the world, really. But a lot of our customers were saying, "Man, if you had a restaurant, this would kill on a burger." And so I believed them, and I took a couple pounds into the location that we're in. And the ladies that were running it, sweet people, I said, y'all try this beef and put it on a burger. And I think there's a market in this town for a grass-finished, whole ground beef burger. And so I checked back with them a couple weeks later, and they said, it's so nice of you to offer that, but we maybe too old, or I don't remember what they said, but we're not interested in starting a new thing.
Right.
And I said, no problem. So I just kept selling beef, pick up, drop off kind of deal. And at some point there, about several months later, they called me and they said, hey, we're going to retire, and we would like for you to have this place to try your concept. Would you come talk to us? And as soon as I got back into town, man, that Monday morning, Monday afternoon, I was sitting there talking to them, and wrote up a little deal on a napkin, and we sent it to the lawyers, and we bought them out.
Nice.
So that's how we got started. When people ask me that, though, in the restaurant, I usually say a temporary lack of judgment is what happened. But it's turned out to be one of the greatest things ever for us, for my family, and for the community. I hope they feel the same way.
Absolutely.
All right. I've asked this question a couple times, and I keep leaving it in here because I really like it. And I'll probably take it out for the next guest, but because of your position and you running for office, I wanted to leave it in and ask this question. If you had to pick one walk-on song to represent who you are, what's your walk-up song?
Lee Greenwood, Proud to be an American.
Okay. It's kind of right on the nose, but okay. I'll take it.
Absolutely. It hits.
It's a great song.
It is. It hits on all aspects of, what I've been through, what I've done, from the Marine Corps all the way up. So.
Yeah. We play it. It's on our playlist.
Right.
Yeah. We love it. All right. Number 2, go ahead.
Oh, it's my turn now. Okay. What inspired you to write the book? I keep looking at the book, and I keep meaning to actually read it.
Okay. So do you have a copy of it yet?
I do not yet.
Well, you will when you leave.
Oh, outstanding.
So this is your copy here.
All right.
So I've been told for years to write a book about, since we started, really, just to kind of chronicle the things that have happened before it gets too far away in history. And so what inspired me, though, is I wanted to write a book to help other business owners. That's the inspiration. I wanted to help other business owners, not necessarily even restaurant business owners, even though I'm talking about my restaurant and it's restaurant related. I wanted to help other business owners view business the way that we view it, and do things the way that we do it, through the perspective and lens that we use, which is completely different than most businesses, which you can see in the results.
Sure.
Nobody, whether they're a fan of Wells or not, no one can argue that we do things different than everybody else. And we do that on purpose. And so I wrote that in the book, kind of laid out the culture, the reasoning, the why, and then the results. And so my belief is, if somebody reads the book, they would be able to at least break down kind of why we do what we do, and then how that might fit into their perspective in their business, and maybe something in there would cause some success on their part. That's the hope.
Resonate with them and transfer into whatever their business is.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. And I'm about to launch a coaching program in the next couple of weeks. We're almost there, where once a week they get a 20-minute video from me, questions to solidify what's been said, and then a challenge to put that into their business. And so my hope is, it's a year-long commitment. It's a 50-week program. But after those 50 lessons, I really do believe that there's just a different perspective. I'm not in business for money. And I think that's the main thing, is if you do the right things the right way, money takes care of itself.
Absolutely.
But if you go after money, you end up treating people in a way that's slightly not the way we should.
Right.
Looking at people just not quite the way we should. And I think that people realize that. And if you're just a number and you're just a dollar, people pick up on that.
Absolutely.
So that's the inspiration behind it.
I love it.
All right, here's your question. This is going to be a general question, but I'm interested in this because of who you are and what you're doing. Who is your hero?
Oh, wow. So I've been asked this a few times. And as far as an individual hero, people say modern time or ancient time. It can be anywhere along the line. I don't know if I necessarily have so much a hero, right? I mean, a good Christian answer is Jesus Christ.
Well,
right?
no,
That's
an influential person.
exactly right. So, an influential
That's
person.
a cliche, by the way.
I know, and people
We
always,
all should be living by Jesus.
right? But as far as who is my hero? I mean, I've had tons of heroes, and they've all been mentors in some form or fashion. People that have stepped up or stood in place of somebody else. I mean, we can look at presidential perspectives. We can look at people that were senatorial, or maybe they're congressional, or maybe it was just a business owner. There was a business owner who mentored me. His name's Jay Renfro, and he's out of California, and he had a law firm. And he was a guy who I ran into at a conference, and this was in I would say probably the mid-'90s. This would have been about 95. And he said, you need a mentor. And I said, well, would you be one? And he said, sure. And so I had a weekly phone call with him in the beginning, and then it went to every couple of weeks, and then it was just a monthly follow-up. And then it was just kind of on a quarterly basis. And if he didn't hear from me for a while, he would call me. But I mean, I knew he was busy. And so this guy made personal time for me, a stranger that
That's
he
awesome.
met. And he really kind of helped guide me and put me along my way with regards towards some of my career and what was going on. And then I met other people along the way. And one guy who became kind of a business coach and mentor to me as well, and was one of my best friends, his name is John Carroll. And he went on to get his doctorate. And so he's Dr. Carroll. So, I always joke, doctor, okay. But he provided from a business perspective, because he taught business and finance. And so from a collegiate level, he would say, this is great, but what about this? And then I would turn something into a success that wasn't supposed to be, kind of like what you were saying. And he would use it in his class. He would take that. So he was kind of, as he was helping me, he's building his lesson plans and curriculum, but he's also, like, hey, you really ought to focus on here. If you could do this, that would be great. Or I would do something, and he goes, go for it. See what happens. It sounds great. And he was that mentor that would help me and kind of really push me along the way. And sometimes he would say, I don't think that's a good idea. And, we need those people, right?
We do.
And whether we listen to them or not,
We need
because
people.
if we don't listen to them, I should have listened to you. Right. So
I wish people would listen to me more on some things. Some people, and I say that half joking but half serious, there's people who have a different vantage and perspective.
right.
And I believe that we're gifted with that. So
Sure.
some people can see it, some people can't, and there's some people who can say, I don't think I do that,
Right.
and then they go do it, and then they come back. Usually they don't ever come back. Usually you watch from a distance, you're like, well, I told you not to do that.
Yeah. Right.
But that's
Sure.
on them.
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah.
All right, man. What you got? Number 3.
Number 3 for you. So I was thinking about this one. In today's world, we're hearing a lot about cattle ranchers that they're being sized down. They're being pushed out. Folks are losing their cattle, losing their farms. Generational farms are being lost. They're being bought out. From an overall perspective, how do you view the cattle industry here in the U.S.? Is it something that's going to maintain long term? Because I'm hearing that a lot of things are going to like South America and other areas. So,
Okay,
I know that's a big one.
That's a broad question.
Yes, sir.
So there's a couple factors that play into the first answer, which is what's happening right now. Why are they selling out? Land values are why they're selling out.
Right.
Because they can make more money in a 15-minute transaction, and they lose their land, but they make more money on the land than they would have ever made in cattle.
Sure.
And so it sets them up for them and usually their kids.
Right.
So that's the reason, because land values are so high, and our populations and our community growths are so explosive right now that even out here, I saw more deer on this property than I have in my entire life this year. At one point we looked at, I think it was 12 or 14 doe in one cove right back here. I've never seen that in my life.
It's because of the builds out.
Because
and they're
people are
in.
clearing. Yeah. People are clearing all around us. They're coming from Caddo Mills. They're clearing out, putting neighborhoods in. And so those are the ecosystem's changing. The reason that people are selling out, I believe, is because of that. Cattle are very high. Cattle are the highest they've ever been in my lifetime right now.
Can you explain that?
What
do you mean by the cattle are high?
The price, the cattle price is higher than I've ever seen. We just sold calves this past week, and they were straight off their mamas, 350 to 385, and they brought more money than I thought they would. I have cattle right now. I've got some yearlings that are going to be sold tomorrow. They're higher than I've ever thought they would be. So when prices are high, it's an incentive for people to sell out, especially when they get older. I think the second part of that is you've got a lot of old folks that do the ranching, and so they were like me, and they said, I'm going to college, I'm going to get a degree, I'm going to go work in corporate America. I did that and came home.
Right.
A lot of people are doing that and not coming home, and so guys are getting in their 80s. They can't run cattle anymore. They can't do the job. They don't want to haul. They don't want to do the feeding in the winter, all the work. And so they're just, because prices are high, they're selling out, and then they'll sell the land and make just a mint on that dirt.
Right.
And, this property right next to me here, it's not that great a property. It's a lot of floodplain. It sold for over $2 million, couple hundred acres, over $2 million. I laughed at them and I said, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, because that's maybe 60% of that's usable,
right.
And so I don't even know how you make your money back on that, but that's the way it is. So if, I tell people jokingly, they say, is your place for sale? I say, sure. You got $5 million. And they laugh at me. I said, well, you ask.
Yeah.
I don't want to sell it.
Right.
But you go get $5 million. I'll find out a way to go move somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, because they're moving houses up on my north property right now. By next year, I'll probably be looking at privacy fences on my north fence. And that makes me sick.
Sure.
That makes me physically ill to think about. I grew up out here with trees and no neighbors and cattle on both sides. And they're wanting to do that on the other side too. So at some point they'll squeeze me out,
right?
Because they'll complain enough about the smell that's always been here and the noise that's always been here and the tractor that's always been running.
Well, and the key to that is it's always been here. Y'all moved in.
It doesn't work though.
Yeah.
It's still, after a while, you're like, you know what? You're not worth my time. You're not worth the complaints. And so people move out because of that. But the reason the cattle are so high right now is because our inventories are low nationally. Mm-hmm. And unless there's droughts that have happened, there have been sell-offs that have happened. There's been a lot of beef consumed and stored over the last several years. COVID kind of triggered some of that. People started storing up more than they ever had when they saw the grocery store shelves bare. So there's been this thing that's happened, and with some stuff that's happened, the inventory's low, and so prices are high, and I don't see them coming down for a few years. Unless
there's just something about that ranch lifestyle, though.
I don't ever want to do anything else.
Right.
If I ever had to sell this place, I would move east probably. And buy a bigger place with the money that I don't want to do that.
Right.
But if that ever had to happen, I don't know if I answered the question or not.
No, you did.
I talked about it for a while anyway.
Well, no, and you did. I mean, because everybody was enamored with Yellowstone, right? Mm-hmm. The show. So the show comes out, and you hear about 4.6s, and you hear about all the ranches, and it's like, wow, they're still the largest working ranches, and you hear about all these ranches, and you have the cattle farms, and it's just there's something about being in the middle of thousands of acres, and you don't hear that traffic.
Right.
You don't hear that hum of the road or whatever. Right. Yep. There's something about that noise, and anybody who's ever probably come out to visit you, they notice the silence. I was going to say
the guys that come on the podcast they're the most obvious to me is they'll say, I had a couple guys the other day just come out and they're like, man, I love that sound of nothing.
Uh-huh.
I love that sound of
Absolutely.
nothing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, you ready?
Sure.
Here's your third.
All right.
If you could go back in time in history and change one historical event, what would it be?
Oh, wow. If I could go back in time and change one historical event. Well, and then there's the butterfly effect, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So, okay, what would I change? If I could make the change, I would make it so that Hitler didn't get elected.
Okay. Yeah.
That would be the change.
That would be an amazing change to society. That's an awesome answer. I was thinking keep Lincoln from being assassinated.
Right.
I think that would have forwarded our country
Sure.
More than we see it now. Even I think that would have set a better tone. But Hitler's a very good answer as well. That's a great answer.
Well, because both of them had global implications too.
They did.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
One of them a lot more devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean we've got there's Israeli defense funds that are coming up. There's things that are coming down the pike as everybody's talking about what happened in Gaza, and it's just so that's just been on my mind and been in my heart, and something that when you ask that, it's like, okay, you run through all the different things, okay, well there's Gettysburg, there's and it's like, okay, and so what do you pick?
Right.
And so that one, I guess just because it's been on my mind and my heart, that I was like, if Hitler never took power,
it would be 6 million Jews that weren't,
right,
extinguished. I mean, the implications there would be beautiful. It would be beautiful for sure. Well, man, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming out and doing this. And I really hope that constituents will listen to this podcast and see the guy that you are. That's my hope. Not necessarily the candidate, even the man that you are, and the way that you think, and the way that you see life, and the way that the lens that you use. And I think that is one of the most important things that we can vote on.
Sure.
Is the man, not necessarily the positions, because if we know the man, we'll know the positions. And the only way to really know that is to talk about it. And there may have been a couple questions in there that were a little, rough around the edges. I hope not, but direct. But I really wanted people to hear your answers on those things.
Appreciate it.
Because I believe, as a guy that votes and a guy that's not running for office, those are important things.
Sure.
They're important to us. And of course, the hot button is usually all that we get hit on, the news, the sound bites,
right,
are the things. And so I appreciate your honesty, your openness, coming out, being a part of it. And help me share it out to the folks that need to hear it, because
Absolutely.
I think it can be real helpful to your cause. Wow. And I wish you all the best on this and whatever you have in the future. Just keep trying to help Texas. I appreciate that.
I do not plan on stopping.
Well, if you don't have my book, you can go out to leewellsofficial.com and grab it. Grab the book if you haven't. If you haven't, I don't know what you're waiting on. Go get your own copy. And then this episode has also been brought to us again by It's Fate Creamery and our friends at Sterling Tea. Thank you for your support, and thank you for supporting them. And remember that it's the cookie butter.
I better write that.
The cookie butter shake is what you have to go get a hold of. And you can call me later and say thank you, or however that goes. And so thank you for coming out. Thank you for listening today to the Ranch and Table podcast. And as we say, as we sign off, until next time, adios, farewell, goodbye, good luck, so long.